Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. The next 48 hours are extremely crucial for West Asia. 48 hours is the deadline for the war between Iran and Israel. Iran is expected to attack Israel within 48 hours, or so US intelligence believes. Israeli media is reporting that 100 drones and dozens of missiles could hit IDF targets as early as today. It is the 12th of April 2024. The time is 9 p.m. IST and West Asia is on standby. The United States has asked its consulate staff in Israel to not travel outside the greater Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Beersheba area. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that he has warned Iran to not attack Israel. But you see, the threats, the intelligence reports, they all point at a possible war. Israel says it is on a high state of alert and preparedness. India has advised its citizens against traveling to Iran and Israel. Tel Aviv says it is constantly assessing the situation. Municipalities in Israel have reportedly been told to prepare for an attack. They have been told to ensure that all public shelters are ready for use. Civilians have also been asked to remain vigilant. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has contacted Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He has been presented with multiple options. Israeli interests that Iran could possibly strike. And among the options was also a direct attack on Israel using medium-range missiles. It will be Khamenei who will be taking the final call. Basically, he will instruct the armed forces of Iran as to where they need to strike. So where will that be? Israel is preparing for a potential strike either in the south or in the north of Israel. Let's just draw out a map for you. This is Israel. In the north, you have Nazareth, Haifa. In the south, you have Beersheba, Eliot, Rahat. The question is, where could Iran strike? Social media accounts linked to the IRGC have started posting videos. The videos showed simulated missile attacks on Israel's Haifa airport in the north. This is a small airport. It only operates flights to Cyprus. Also, Israel nuclear facility in Dimona in the south of the country. Now, what has Iran said? Obviously, nothing on what it would be its target, but reports claim that Iran wants to ensure that its attack is quote-unquote controlled and non-escalatory. Reports say Iran's plan is to, quote, use regional proxies to launch a number of attacks on Israel, quote-unquote. Basically, Iran is concerned that the attack could backfire. And what happens if Israel intercepts the missiles? What happens if Israel responds with a heavy barrage of missiles? These are some of the questions Khamenei is reportedly weighing on. Western media quotes an Iranian official as saying the strike plans are in front of the supreme leader and he is still weighing the political risk, adding that no final decision has been taken. That said, a strike is imperative. I am not saying that. Here's a post by Iran's mission to the US. Let me read it out for you. Had the UN Security Council condemned the Zionist regime's reprehensible act of aggression on our diplomatic premises in Damascus and subsequently brought to justice its perpetrators, the imperative for Iran to punish this rogue regime might have been obviated. Where could it attack? US intel reports claim Iran could strike on Israeli soil, as opposed to hitting Israel's interests elsewhere. We have been telling you that Israel has temporarily closed down over 20 embassies around the world. You now have the US ruling out any threat to these buildings. So could the Iranian attack be on Golan Heights? This is where it is located, in southwestern Syria. Golan Heights is a rocky plateau. This is how it looks. In 1967, Israel seized Golan Heights from Syria in the Six-Day War. Most of its Arab residents fled Golan Heights. An armistice line was drawn. Golan Heights came under Israeli control. Now cut to 1973. Syria and a coalition of Arab countries launched a surprise attack on Israel. It was Yom Kippur Day. Syria tried to retake the Golan Heights, but the surprise attack was thwarted. In 1974, Israel and Syria signed an armistice. In 1981, Israel unilaterally annexed the Golan Heights. No country has recognized Israel's claim on Golan Heights. But that has not stopped Israel from populating the Golan Heights. There are some 30 Israeli settlements in the Golan Heights. Over 20,000 Israelis live there. Why would Golan Heights be a potential Iranian target? On the 1st of April, Iranian consulate building, remember, was hit in Syria. This happened in the Syrian capital, Damascus. Golan Heights also is in Syria. In fact, it is all of 60 kilometers from Damascus. Israel claims this area, but this area is not within Israel, meaning hitting Golan Heights does not come with the kind of risk that hitting, say, a Tel Aviv does. Quoting a source, Politico is reporting that Iran is planning a larger than usual aerial attack. A mix of drones and missiles will be used, but the strike will be limited. Big question, can the Israeli Iron Dome save Golan Heights? Here's what the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, has said. We have a multi-layered air defense capability that has proven itself amid the war with thousands of successful interceptions, but the defense is never going to be hermetic. Netanyahu has issued a warning. Whoever harms us, we will harm them. It's not a question of who anymore, not even a question of if. It's a question of what is likely to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours. Will another war break out in West Asia? Also, do you think this escalation can be stopped? Israel is turning to the US with hope. There was a late-night call, in fact, between the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and America's Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. And following that call, the Pentagon issued a statement. Let me read it out for you. Secretary Austin assured Minister Gallant that Israel could count on full US support to defend Israel against Iranian attacks, which Tehran has publicly threatened. Austin reportedly also complained to Gallant that the US was not notified before the April 1 strike on the Iranian consulate, adding that the strike has put at risk American forces in the region. Look, here's the irony. Iran is turning to Washington, but the US has been forced to lean on Beijing. You heard that right. The US is banking on China to stop the attack. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was forced to pick up the phone with his Chinese counterpart. Blinken asked Beijing to use its influence and stop Tehran from attacking Israel. China obviously loves playing the peacemaker. Beijing has jumped in with the pledge to cool down tensions in West Asia. Will it be able to do that, though? The deadline for the war is drawing closer. China has less than 48 hours. The clock is ticking. The world is watching closely. Where will Iran's missiles and drones land? And we have some breaking inputs coming in right this minute. The US has issued yet another warning to Israel, with the White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby saying that there continues to be, quote-unquote, very credible, viable and imminent threat from Iran. In fact, Kirby has also said that US President Joe Biden is being briefed multiple times a day. Now, US officials are once again saying that they expect Iran to attack Israel by the end of the weekend, basically, and possibly as soon as today. Our correspondent Jody Cohen is in Ranana tracking all the developments on the ground for us. She's now joining us over the phone line. for more on what the situation is looking like. Let's go straight to her. Jody, tell us more about what you're picking up at this point.
Hi, Molly. So there have been alarms going off and alerts in northern Israel throughout the day. And I have to say that this isn't unusual in itself. That's happened daily since the 8th of October, the day after Hamas's attack on the 7th of October. But obviously, there's a heightened sense of alert. Israel's on high alert because of this threat that's coming from Iran. Now, we know that 8 countries have issued a travel advisory for against traveling to Israel, and also several countries have done the same for Iran. India has given a travel advisory against traveling to Iran and to Israel. Defense Minister Gallant met with CENTCOM Commander General Kurilla from the US. They were discussing the readiness for an Iranian attack, and Gallant said that Israel is prepared in defense, on the ground, in the air, and in cooperation with neighbors, which is interesting because that seems to suggest that Israel is preparing in cooperation with Egypt and Jordan. And he also said in cooperation with friends, which would suggest the US, UK, and others, and said that Israel will know how to respond.
Right, Jody, we're picking up the municipalities in Israel have been told to prepare for an attack. They've been told to ensure that all public shelters are ready for use. Civilians also have been told to remain vigilant. Tell us more about the kind of preparations that are being made at this point.
So Israel has been told that there's something called the Home Front Command, which is a section of the Israel Defense Forces, which is to communicate with citizens. And the advice was to carry on as has been already for the past 6 months. So the shelters are open. People have been advised to know where to go in the event of a siren going off, to know where their nearest shelter is. If they live in an apartment, to go to the stairwell, or if they're near a public shelter, to head there. People are likely to have, a bag packed to be able to run and go. People are advised to stock up on bottled water, to charge mobile phone chargers in case of a blackout of electricity, to stock up on canned goods, things like that. I was speaking to people on the streets just yesterday, interviewing them and asking them, are they concerned, are they making preparations? And I would say about half of the people were saying that yes, they were concerned and they had their bag packed and they had bought their bottled water, and the other half were more confident, particularly being in the centre of the country. We have heard that, again, there are many reports flying around saying that an attack from Iran is imminent, or it could come in the next 24 hours, or it could come in the next 48 hours. The US Embassy told their staff not to travel outside the Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, or Beersheba, which is the city further towards the south, reportedly. And so that people are saying there could be an attack in the north or on the south. Perhaps there might be an attack in areas where civilians have already been evacuated, because many civilians have been evacuated by Israel on the borders since the 7th of October. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what could happen, when it could happen. There are reports saying that there could be a major attack from Iran involving 100 drones and dozens of missiles. Other reports suggesting it could be a smaller scale strike to avoid an escalation. So it's very much a matter of wait and see. But as you said, it seems to be the case of not if an attack would happen, but when an attack might happen and what sort of form that would take.
All right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Jody Cohen getting us up to speed with the latest coming in from on the ground and what things are looking like. Thanks very much for now. Shifting focus now to another war zone, Ukraine. Its battlefield wars are only mounting. Its army is outnumbered and outgunned. It is struggling to slow down the Russian advances. In short, the situation is bad. On the 11th of April, Russia launched a major airstrike on Ukraine, destroying Kiev's largest power-generating plant, the Tripilska plant. Footage showed fire and smoke billowing out of the Soviet-era facility. Not just Kiev, Russian missiles and drones hit power facilities in several regions of Ukraine. This is not new. Recently, Russia has been ramping up pressure on Ukraine's embattled energy system. Ukraine is running low on air defenses, and Russia is taking advantage of that. The destroyed power plant outside Kiev is a major supplier for the capital region as well as for Cherkasy and Zhytomyr regions. It is the third and last facility owned by the state-owned energy company Centrenergo. Following the Russian strikes, the head of the supervisory board of the company, Andrei Gota, said, and I'm quoting, "Everything is destroyed." Over more than 2 years of the war, Russia has systematically targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure. By breaking Ukraine's power grid, Moscow basically wants to break the Ukrainian people's spirit by depriving them of electricity, heat, water. The Tripilska plant was the biggest energy facility near Kiev. It was built to have a capacity of 1,800 megawatts, which is more than the pre-war needs of Ukraine's biggest city. The Yukarenko grid operator said its substations and power generating facilities had been damaged in attacks on the regions of Odessa, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Lviv, and Kiev. And what's more, Ukraine's largest private electricity company, DTEK, which lost 80% of its generating capacity in attacks in March, said that Russia's latest attacks had hit 2 of its power stations. The attacks, which hammered thermal as well as hydroelectric power plants, sparked fears about the resilience of Ukraine's energy system. It has already been hobbled by Russia's air campaign in the war's first winter. Condemning the attacks as terror, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, and I'm quoting, "We need air defense and other defense support, not eye-closing and long discussions." Ukraine's appeals for urgent air defense supplies from the West have grown increasingly desperate. Since last month, Russia has renewed its long-range aerial assaults on the Ukrainian energy system. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba was blunt, in fact, in his calls for more US-made Patriot systems. During a visit to Slovakia, he told the Ukrainian state news agency, "What is there to discuss? There is only a single question. Give us Patriot systems. If we had Patriots, we would not have lost all of this today." Clearly, Ukraine is blaming the West for its losses on the battlefield. And meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry described its attack on Ukraine as a tit-for-tat move. Moscow said that the strikes were a response to Ukrainian drone attacks on Russia's oil, gas and energy facilities. Putin told his ally, the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, that the attacks were a part of Russia's objective of the demilitarization of Ukraine. Remember, it is one of the stated objectives behind Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Russian news agencies quoted Putin as telling Lukashenko, I'm quoting, "Unfortunately, we observed a series of strikes on our energy sites recently and were obliged to respond." According to news agency Reuters, Ukraine has tried to find a pressure point against Russia by bombing oil facilities far behind the front lines. There is fear in Ukraine of a big Russian offensive soon. Since gaining control of Avdiivka in February, Russia now controls 18% of Ukrainian territory. The Russian forces are not stopping. Troops have inched forward in the Donetsk region, in fact, and are keeping up the pressure on the fronts west of Avdiivka and Bakhmut. While Ukraine faces manpower and weapons shortage, Russia has been able to recruit a large number of volunteer fighters, allowing it to sustain the momentum on the battlefield. And experts say Russia will attack Ukraine in places it looks the weakest. while maintaining focus on eastern Donbass region. They say that Russian strikes look like they are aimed at scaring people to leave the city, laying the ground for a possible ground operation at a later date. And if Russia keeps up the intensity of its strikes, Ukraine is in danger of running out of options. It has already run out of air defense munitions, and now it is having to make difficult decisions about what to defend. Why is the West leaving Ukraine out to dry? Have they lost hopes of Ukraine ever winning this war? You know how the president of the Maldives, Mohamed Moizu, has been pushing an India out campaign? Well, turns out he needs Indian military personnel out, but not Indian tourists. He is willing to fray diplomatic ties with India, but does not want to miss out on tourism profits. Basically, he wants the best of both worlds. If not, then what explains this? A major tourism body in the island nation is planning to conduct road shows across several key Indian cities. I'm talking about the Maldives Association of Travel Agents and Tour Operators. It has expressed interest in holding discussions with India's High Commissioner in the Maldives. The tourism body now wants to explore ways to boost travel and tourism cooperation with India. In a statement, it said that India remains a crucial tourist market to the Maldives. Weren't they aware of this before picking fights with India? Why didn't the government think of this when it asked Indian personnel to leave, or when the ministers made derogatory remarks about the Indian Prime Minister? You see, the Maldives is facing the consequences of its own actions. It started a diplomatic spat. 3 deputy ministers, remember, hit out at the Indian Prime Minister after he shared pictures from Lakshadweep. Naturally, Indians decided to pull back. After all, who would bear such disrespect? They dropped their plans to visit the Maldives. And this, by the way, included multiple celebrities and public figures. For a long time, Indians have been among the top visitors to the Maldives, but now the number of Indian tourists going to the Maldives has slipped to the 6th position. In the last 3 years, an average, more than 200,000 Indians visited the Maldives annually. This was the highest from any country post-COVID. Let's just take a closer look at the numbers here. In 2023, almost 210,000 Indian tourists flocked to the Maldives. In 2022, the figure stood at 240,000. In 2021, it was 211,000. But so far this year, a little over 37,400 Indians have visited the Maldives. This is far less as compared to similar months last year. 33% less, to be specific. And the decline has been sudden, by the way, and it has happened only after the Maldives decided to spoil its relations with India. What can the island nation do now? Because the tourism decline would only get worse, and the Maldives has a lot to lose. Consider this. According to Euromonitor, the number of outbound Indian travelers is expected to double to 47 million by 2030. Their spending stood at $35 billion in 2019. By 2030, it is projected to increase to an impressive $84 billion. And going by this trend, India is expected to ascend to the 6th largest outbound travel market globally by the year 2030. So if India's influence in global tourism is going to grow to this extent, can the Maldives really afford to miss out? Absolutely not. The Maldives tourism sector is the main driver of its economy, remember. So maybe it should consider making amends with India and hope for tourists to return. And it seems the island nation is doing exactly that, or is trying to. One of its biggest tourist bodies is trying to appease India. Even President Moizu is loosening his anti-India stance, it seems. Recently, he heaped praise on India for implementing the greatest number of projects in the Maldives, even called India the Maldives' closest ally. And why not? He was, after all, requesting for a generous relief from the hefty debts the Maldives owes to India. By the end of last year, the island nation owed approximately $401 million to India, and India has always been a force for good. In fact, last week, the Indian government approved export of various essential commodities like eggs, pulses, rice, wheat, sugar, at the request of the Maldivian government. The approved quantities were the highest in the last 40 years, despite the diplomatic ties being at their lowest. Maldivian Foreign Minister Musa Zamir publicly thanked the Indian government for its gesture. And just 2 days ago, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended warm greetings to Moizu on the occasion of Eid. You see, India has only been generous towards the Maldives. It continues to do the same. And Moizu, despite his anti-India stance, is often left with no option but to come begging for help. Let's now take a quick look at what else we have lined up for you on the show tonight. Do you have a flight to board this weekend? Well, we have some news for you. A whistleblower is claiming that Boeing Dreamliner can split open mid-air. Dreamliners are what many airlines operate for their long-haul routes, by the way. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for stable ties with China. We will get you all the details in just a bit. Also on the show tonight, what are the 6 things you should never say to a bald man? The answers are coming up in our special segment, Friday Flavor. And we also tell you why Canada has closed in-person operations in consulates in 3 Indian cities. Is it a resource crunch, or is there more to the story? That's coming up in just a few minutes. Another week ends with more horror stories from Boeing. There are fresh allegations of structural flaws in Boeing 787 Dreamliners. These are planes used for long-haul flights. They have been flying commercially since 2011. In India, Air India operates Dreamliners, as does Vistara. And now a whistleblower has claimed that these planes, the Dreamliners, can break apart mid-air. What this whistleblower is basically saying is that Boeing has introduced shortcuts in the manufacturing process, and as a result of this, these planes have become vulnerable to a mid-air disaster. Parts of the Dreamliner's fuselage or body could fall apart after thousands of flights. This is what the whistleblower is claiming. Who is this whistleblower, you ask? His name is Sam Salehpour. He is an engineer and he has been with Boeing for over 10 years. Salehpour claims he had raised concerns about the safety of Boeing 787, but his concerns were ignored. What's more, Salehpour was sidelined. His lawyer claims, and I'm quoting, rather than heeding his warning, Boeing prioritized getting the planes to market as quickly as possible, despite the known, well-substantiated issues he raised. Boeing denies this. It claims it never sidelined the whistleblower. What's more, it encourages employees to report safety concerns. But the thing is, Salehpour's allegations are not one-off. In the year 2019, workers in Boeing's Charleston factory said they were rushing to put together the planes. The workers said they were worried about the safety of these planes. Their concerns were ignored. This is John Barnett. He had worked for Boeing for over 30 years. Barnett was a quality manager at Boeing's North Charleston plant. This plant built the 787 Dreamliner. After Barnett retired, he told the media the horror stories he had witnessed at the Boeing plant. Barnett claimed Boeing workers were under pressure to meet deadlines. They had to resort to fitting substandard parts in the plane. Substandard parts would be removed from scrap bins and fitted into planes. Boeing would compromise on safety in order to avoid delays in the production line, is the allegation. The whistleblower also said there were serious problems with the oxygen system of the Dreamliners, so much so that in case of an emergency, 1 in 4 breathing masks would not work. Barnett claimed that he conducted a test on the emergency oxygen system. He found a failure rate of 25%. So what did Barnett do? Well, he alerted his manager. But to what end? Barnett claimed instead of action being taken, his career was hampered because he raised a stink. Does this sound like a pattern to you? After retiring, Barnett took legal action against Boeing. The former employee turned a whistleblower. Last month, he was found dead in Charleston. This was days after he had given a formal deposition and was questioned by Boeing's lawyers. Engineer Sam Salipur now says he was threatened with termination after he raised concerns about the safety of Boeing Dreamliners. The engineer was allegedly kept out of important meetings, important projects. He was also allegedly denied medical leave. Salipur was finally transferred. He was made to work on the 777s. But soon Salipur realized that there were issues with the assembly line of the 777 as well. He filed a whistleblower complaint with America's FAA, or the Federal Aviation Administration, in January. The agency had launched a probe and is currently investigating the whistleblower's claims. Will the frozen ties between India and China see a thaw soon? I asked that question because a day after Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for stable ties with China, Beijing has responded positively. That's right. Addressing a media briefing in Beijing, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said, and I'm quoting, "China has noted the remarks by the Prime Minister. We believe that sound and stable China-India relations serve the common interests of both sides and are conducive to peace and development of the region and beyond." And while responding to a question about the ongoing border dispute, Mao said that it does not represent the entirety of China-India relations, saying that it should be placed appropriately in bilateral relations and managed properly. The Chinese official further reiterated that both countries have maintained close communication, both diplomatically and militarily, also noting that there has been positive progress when it comes to resolving the border issues. Now, China's response came after Prime Minister Modi said that India's ties with China are important and significant. In an interview with Newsweek magazine, Prime Minister Modi said that the India-China border situation needs to be addressed urgently to resolve the abnormality in the bilateral interactions. He said, and I'm quoting now, "It is my belief that we need to urgently address the prolonged situation on our borders so that the abnormality in our bilateral interactions can be put behind us. Stable and peaceful relations between India and China are important for not just our two countries, but the entire region and the world." Now, earlier, China's state-run Delhi had termed Prime Minister Modi's remarks as a gesture of goodwill. Remember, the two world powers are facing off against each other along the over 3,400-kilometer long border known as the Line of Actual Control. Ties have been virtually frozen except for trade ever since the Eastern Ladakh border standoff erupted in 2020 following a violent clash in the Pangong Tso area. While China's talk of stability at the border is a positive sign, it's not new. Beijing has often sought to de-link the standoff at the border from the overall bilateral relationship with India. However, India has maintained that there cannot be restoration of normalcy in its relations with China as long as the state of the borders remains abnormal. And this begs the question, is China serious about seeking normal ties with India? Remember, to resolve the standoff, India and China have so far held 21 rounds of core commander level talks. According to the Chinese military, the two sides so far agreed to disengage from 4 friction points, namely the Galwan Valley, the Pangong Lake, Hot Springs and Jianan Daban, Gogra. But India wants the Chinese People's Liberation Army to disengage its troops from the Depsang and Demchok areas. New Delhi will not unfreeze relations until China makes major concessions on the border and returns to the pre-2020 status quo. Meanwhile, Beijing has adopted a dual approach, it seems. On one hand, it is building up troops and military infra at the border. And on the other hand, it talks of restoring ties. It has made negotiations a test of wills. But all is not bad. There are signs towards stabilization of the China-India ties. Most importantly, the disputed border has remained relatively quiet. There has been no further escalation or clashes in the last year. Yes, tensions between the two militaries deployed close to the border persist, especially in the western sector where the military standoff continues. But the relative calm around the line of actual control, which is the de facto border, indicates that both Beijing and New Delhi seek to de-escalate. The two sides are actively talking to each other and discussing their troubled relationship. This has been happening both between the military and the diplomatic establishments. It is also happening between the top leaders. All this offers some hope for improving relations in 2024. Remember, India is going to the polls this year with Prime Minister Modi seeking a third term, and this is why the timing of Prime Minister Modi's comment on China gains greater significance. It shows a readiness to re-engage with China. Once the election is over, will 2024 see the turning of a new page in China-India ties? We will have to wait and watch. Months after India expelled 41 Canadian diplomats, Canada has reduced staff members across diplomatic missions in the country. It has ceased in-person operations in its consulate in Mumbai, Chandigarh and Bengaluru. What really is behind the downsizing? Ottawa says shortage of supervisory personnel. Our next report getting you the complete story.
More than 5 months after India asked Canada to repatriate 41 diplomats, Canada has further reduced a number of local staff. At its missions in India, Canada has slashed its staff in its Mumbai, Chandigarh and Bengaluru consulates, citing a shortage of supervisory personnel to oversee them. It's not clear how many have been retrenched, but reports suggest that the number is significant. But at the time of the mass withdrawal of its diplomats, Canada has stopped all in-person services at its 3 consulates. Confirming the staff reductions, a media relations official in the High Commission told an Indian news outlet that the decision was necessary, given the departure of Canadian staff last year. Last October, India told Canada to withdraw 41 diplomats from India after New Delhi demanded parity over diplomatic representation. It was in response to Ottawa's allegations that Indian agents had been behind the killing of Khalistan terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's accusation had sparked a massive diplomatic tiff between the two countries. New Delhi had labelled these allegations as absurd and has refused to aid Canadian investigators without concrete evidence. On Wednesday, Trudeau raised the Nijjar issue again, while testifying at a public inquiry that is into foreign interference in Canadian elections. Responding to questions about how his government handled the alleged foreign interference, Trudeau accused the previous Conservative government of having a very cozy relationship with the current Indian government. He emphasized how his government has consistently defended Canadians' rights, citing the case he presented to Parliament about Niger skilling as a prime example. He said that his government has always stood up to defend minorities and the rights of the minorities, even if it irritates their home countries overseas. This even as India has repeatedly warned Canada against supporting secessionist forces and legitimizing terrorism. The Indian government says Canada had not taken enough steps to curtail the activities of Khalistani groups on its soil. India's condition for cooperating with Canadian probe into Niger skilling is that Ottawa show concrete evidence to back its claims. But 5 months later, the Trudeau government is yet to provide proof, linking New Delhi to Niger skilling on Canadian soil. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
On that note, we're taking a very short break. We will be right back. Stay tuned. You're watching Gravitas. Don't go anywhere.
Everyone loves a contest. But sport isn't just about victory and defeat. When the GOATs in sport speak, you hear it first on WION.
You have to play good cricket over a period of time.
I should push myself right out of the damn tournament.
We go beyond the stats. Our stories are quoted the world over.
At WION, sport is part of our DNA. Come, join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Iran informs Washington that it will respond to Israel's Damascus embassy attack. But a cautious Iran underlines it wants to avoid major escalation. Yoav Gallant warns that a direct Iranian attack would require an appropriate Israeli response against Tehran. Washington reaches out to Tehran through allies. Will the US keep up its ironclad commitment to Israel's security?
Is there life beyond planet Earth? Do extraterrestrials exist? If yes, where? Are we alone, or do we have company in this vast cosmos? These questions are as old as time, and NASA hopes to find an answer to a big question. Are there extraterrestrials on Jupiter's moon? That's the focus of a NASA probe. What do we know about it? When does it kick off? What's the plan? Why Jupiter's moon? Let's break it all down for you. Now, as we all know, Jupiter is the biggest planet in the solar system, and NASA's interplanetary probe has its destination set for one of Jupiter's moons. It is called Europa. Scientists believe it is covered in frozen water. It is almost as large as Earth's moon and is the fourth largest moon of Jupiter. Europa has been long thought of as a potential host for extraterrestrial life in our solar system, in fact. Let's just tell you more about the mission now. The Clipper spacecraft is due to blast off in October. This is a $5 billion probe. And how soon do we expect to get an answer to the million-dollar questions I just mentioned? I'm sure you are very eager, but it will be a long wait, so we will have to be patient. The year 2031 is when the spacecraft should be in orbit around Jupiter and Europa. A detailed study of Europa will start. How exactly will it work? According to the mission's project scientist, Bob Papalardo, they have instruments like cameras and spectrometers, a magnetometer and a radar that can basically penetrate right through ice, bounce off liquid water and back to the surface to tell them how thick the ice is and where liquid water is located. Now, the thing is, the expectation is not to find little green aliens swimming in the water, though that is perhaps one of the first images that comes to one's mind when thinking of extraterrestrials, thanks to the sci-fi movies out there. According to the mission managers, they are not even looking for life itself, only for the conditions that could support it, which in itself will be a very crucial breakthrough, of course. As per Jordan Evans, project manager for the Europa Clipper mission, if moons around planets far away from stars could hold life, then the number of opportunities around the solar system, around the universe where life could take hold, goes up dramatically. Naturally, there are a number of challenges. The vast distances basically mean that when Clipper sends its data back, the signal will take 45 minutes to arrive at the mission control. Also, keeping Clipper powered will be a major challenge. The planning for this mission started in the late 1990s. It is expected to conclude around 2034. That's when Clipper will likely have reached the end of its useful life. Have you or someone you know recently gone bald? While some do it willingly, some have no choice but to bid farewell to their already thinning crown. So as you prepare to socialize this weekend, note this: people can be really sensitive about how you react to their hair or lack of it. While it's quite tempting to maybe crack a joke on baldness, here are 6 things never to tell a person who has just lost his mane. These tricks are tried and tested. Number 1, don't hesitantly praise it. Yes, you will feel tempted to address the elephant in the room, but don't try to convince a bald person that you like their new look when you are not convinced yourself. They will smell your white lies. Number 2, the skull praise, saying at least you have a nice shaped head. Isn't as nice as it sounds in your head, but it is understandable. You may feel like you have been put in the spot to say something, anything to acknowledge someone's baldness, but you would not want to hurt their feelings either. So what's an easy way out then? Well, to reach for something nice to say. If not about their hair, then about their head. But the thing is, what does it even mean? Do heads come in good or bad shapes? How and why does it even matter? Number 3, the genuine curveball. As I said, keep your jokes on hold. Do not tell a bald person that you like their new haircut, because chances are they did not have a lot of say in it. Number 4, the smug relief. If your friend or some loved one had been balding for some time and you had been asking them to just shave everything off, this might be a joyful "I told you so" moment for you, and you might even be right, but just don't rub it in their face. Saying goodbye to your hair already stings, and they do not need your smug relief on top of that. Number 5, the backhanded flirt. This one is rare, but it happens. Some women find bald men attractive. And if you are one of those, don't try to make a big deal out of it in front of a bald man, and definitely do not mention how rare it is to feel that way. And number 6, the not recognizing who you are anymore. Yes, going bald can change a person's appearance a lot, but do not tell them that you cannot recognize them anymore. They might not be feeling like their usual self already, so it's the last thing they would want to hear, perhaps. On that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Kampir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good weekend.